Okay. So so we're starting with this statement that there are gates in heaven that cannot be opened except by melody and song. And this is by a Hasidic rabbi couple hundred years ago. And I want to note that the Hasidic movement, although we often think of it as, oh, those are the people who keep halacha really closely, right? Who observe all sorts of technical halachot in their lives. It is also in the context of mid 18th century Orthodox movements. They were the ones who were actually kind of the anti-intellectuals, so to speak. So the misnagdim or the mitnagdim means the opposers, the opposition, and those were the yeshiva studying rabbis and communities. So there were some commun so Eastern Europe in the 1800s was in the Orthodox world was divided between rabbis who thought that the most important thing was to study and that was the most spiritual and most kind of asked for thing by God. And then the Hasidim who said, look, we want you to like keep the practices in the context of community, but when you're going to pray, what really matters is you point your heart to God. And so that's why a lot of our nigunim, a lot of our wordless melodies are Hasidic, because they wanted this very accessible way of having this deep spiritual experience. So they wrote nigun upon nigun upon nigun. And if you've seen, there are actually YouTube videos of Hasidic celebrations, not on Shabbat, they wouldn't film that, but others, where there's just this room full of Hasidic men like singing at the top of their lungs and they're really feeling it, right? So so that's the context of like accessing deep spiritual practice through song. Like that is a tradition that we draw from sometimes. So I want to go specifically into the it's a translation, but the text of a Hasidic rabbi who had a comment on this. So below this quote we have here, and I'll make this bigger so we can all see it. A quote here by Rabbi Zev Wolf of Yishtabach, who was nicknamed the Or HaMeir in honor of his book. So would someone like to read this, please? This is answering the question of why is Psuke de Zimra called Psuke de Zimra? We have the very simple answer that these are all verses of praise that we sing in this section of the service. This is a spiritual answer. Would someone like to read? Sherry, go ahead.
Look, first of all, we say Sukkah's Zimra, verses of song, about which the rabbis of blessed memory said, why are they called verses of song, Zimra? Since they pare away Maz Zamrim, the husks. And who has ever seen husks left about the floor of a synagogue? Rather, it means to pare away the husks from one's heart and soul. And we continue in this through all the hymns Zim wrote. We pare away the husks of the negative qualities we feel within us. And after, we are ready to pray, implying connection, uniting one's inner thoughts to the loftiness of one's divinity. And when the recitation of the Shema arrives, then a complete unity with the Holy Blessed One is made.
Up for just a couple of minutes. What are your initial reactions or responses? Where does this resonate for you? Corinna.
This is something we've already been discussing the past couple of weeks, that the idea of kind of preparing ourselves really. And I really love the imagery here of we have already talked about, you could do your home things, but then you have to kind of deal with your body, and then you can deal with your mind and your spirit before you're really ready to have that communion with God or to have that spiritual moment. But this is just a really beautiful imagery with
Lovely,
that.
thank you. Any other responses? Sherry.
Well, I went to it in a different way. I love the notion of paring away the husks of the negative qualities, because Well, all of us have negative thoughts and actions too. And I also brought it to sometimes meetings. People are negative, and we have to work on paring that away from ourselves, whoever is making negative comments, to be more positive. To
Mm.
be,
Mm.
so,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Jeff?
Just a sec, let me make sure
Yeah, we can hear you.
we can hear. Okay, great. Uh, I wonder, are the husks just extra stuff, or is all the negativity in the husks?
Mm.
Meaning, when I get down to the bare bones, am I really all positive?
That's so real. I appreciate that.
Because I kind of feel like I've got a little bit of negativity, Yetzer Hara, whatever, that's still in the core. I maybe my soul is pure, but there's other stuff floating around.
Hmm.
It doesn't husk away.
Yeah, and I'm glad you named the Yetzer Hara. That is the evil inclination that the rabbis also spend a lot of time talking about within us. So they know that we are not perfect beings, very, very well. I think. Well, Kristen, do you have a response to that? And then I'm happy to share my thoughts. Or are you on something else?
It's kind of sort of it's along those lines in that it's when I think about paring away the husks from one's heart and soul and getting ready to really make a connection with the divine, it's really about those husks are just all of the other things in my head. It's all of the distractions. It's all of the what do I have to do for the luncheon tomorrow? What do I have to do about this? It's stripping away all of those things that are distracting so I can really be open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Nice. Right. And that makes me think of what are the other things that do that for us, right? The rabbis have this template that we can use. And also, I can imagine taking a long walk in a peaceful place. And that, over time, can help pare away the husks for us until we're ready to have a prayerful experience there. But you can't just hop out of your car, at like Fort Funston and be like, I'm praying now, right? Like that's too quick a transition for most of us to make. Jeff, going back to your question, to me, this is less about finding that purity within us and expecting that we have perfect purity within us, and more about um, paring away the negativity to something that's a little softer inside. And even if that softer has some hurt in it and some bitterness, the prayer can touch that in a way
Hmm.
that we know that we won't become perfect by any given prayer, but at least if we pair that away, we've got a chance at getting moved.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question, Ellen.
I kind of think of this as picturing myself coming in on a cold day to a room with fire and taking off my coat and settling down and relaxing in this place that I can just be in that very comfy moment. I
Mm.
I think I carry around with me all of these things in my head of, oh, I'm glad I got that done. I need to get this done. I need to call so and so. And I don't think I'm ready to pray at that point.
Lovely. Absolutely. Thank you, Patty. Oh, muted.
Oh, I am muted. Hold on.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay, good. Um, so I'm thinking about the communal aspect of removing the husks. And it's making me think about how I've realized sometime in the past that coming to services relaxes me. I find relaxation, I find peace. And I think a lot of it has to do with knowing that I'm in a community where it's allowed to be soft. and drop those husks. It's hard to drop that stuff that we're all grappling with and juggling 6 days a week. And it's not considered a virtue to be soft in a lot of our life. It's not a value. And services and being with other Jews is often the only place I find it. We're talking about values, and so arriving at this place together, I think, is a very special and thing that doesn't happen in other places.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Liz.
It's very interesting listening to everyone talk about all the descriptions. I love the coming out of into a warm room with the fire. That just sounds so comfortable, especially because it's cold right now. I just thought like literally husks and corn. And I just had this image of just peeling that, and also bringing back what my mom would do growing up is she'd buy a bunch of corn and she'd just send us outside and have us sit and peel off the corn. And there's probably something kind of, I mean, that's a nice like family memory, but there's also something more meditative if you think about just the tradition of peeling it off. I also thought about an onion, because you peel back the onion, which has a little sharper connotation to it. So I like the corn husk concept a little bit better.
Nice. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to look at what is the template that is offered to us for this peeling back. And the you're going to see some things here that we don't do in our services, right? I'm giving you the maximalist template, and I'll note along the way the things that we usually include. Okay, and also what you can find in our prayer books. You can't even find all of this in our prayer books. So, okay. There we go. Okay, and I will share this with you afterwards. So the first piece of Birchot HaShachar, or sorry, of Psukei Zimra, is Baruch She'amar. There's a lot of Baruch, right? These are verses of praise, so we often talk about blessings and how blessed God is. So Baruch She'amar, it's a very standard and frequently included prayer in all sorts of services. There are different melodies for it. You can use, remember we spoke about Nusach last week. Nusach is the musical mode that is set for different services and different times of day. So you can use the Shabbat morning musical mode, the Shabbat morning Nusach, to chant Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu. Baruch Oseh Bereshit. Baruch Omer ve'oseh. So you have that very chanty way of going about it. There's also a classical reform melody that we use sometimes. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu. I see a lot of heads bouncing. Yes. So this is, yes, that is one of the melodies. There are some others. One of the things about Baruch She'amar is that it's a responsive prayer, right? So we sing it back and forth, but we can look at that more carefully later. So Baruch She'amar is our opening blessing. And actually, after that final line of Baruch Hu uVaruch Shemo, which means blessed is he and blessed is his name, then there is actually a paragraph of blessing that we don't do, that is part of Baruch She'amar, and that is the opening bookend for Psukei Zimra. Certain sections of the service, not every section, but Psukei Zimra is one of them, have bookend blessings. And so a bookend blessing has an opening blessing, and then all the prayers in between, and then a closing blessing. And that very neatly defines that section of service. So we actually even have prayers that have an opening blessing, a bunch of other text, and a closing blessing, like the Friday night Kiddush. right? You think of how we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen, and then Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, and then we continue on, da 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 da, and then at the end we come back to Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh Shabbat, right? So we conclude it with another blessing. That's called a long blessing, right? When we have an opening and a closing, when we have the bookends, that's a long blessing, and we repeat that structure for this section of service. Psuke de Zimra has that. Hallel, the verses of praise we sing on holidays, another example, has an opening and closing blessing with the other stuff in between. So Baruch She'amar is not just a song. It is a functional blessing. That's what I'm trying to get at. It has a purpose. You could say, oh, I'm going to do Psuke de Zimra without that, but it would feel if for people who are used to praying it with the structure, it would feel a little bit untethered. So again, choices to make, and also knowing what the impact of those choices might be. Then we get the blessing before biblical passages, and that's that ending blessing Baruch She'amar, and then we have the biblical passages. So here's some stuff that we don't always have in our prayer books, and we often don't do, even though they're in our prayer books. So we have a passage from First Chronicles. Talk about a biblical book that does not get a lot of attention. So First and Second Chronicles are the very, very last books of the Tanakh, and they are exactly what they sound like in Chronicles. They are summaries of things that came before them, with, of course, a little bit of retelling and reshaping. So in First Chronicles, David brings the ark to Jerusalem, to Zion, and so that is told as the first passage, and then we get some various verses on God's mercy and protection. We do have most of those in Eit Ratzon and Sim Shalom. I noticed that Mishkan Tefillah does not have those, except for one of them, Psalm 92, and it doesn't. And then in Sha'ar Zahav, which is I read a creative blessing for bodies from that book last week, and if you can see my screen, this is the Sha'ar Zahav prayer book. It's purple with this beautiful gold print on it, and that is the prayer book of the primary LGBT Reform Synagogue in San Francisco. So they have extra material in Psuke de Zimra in this section, but they don't have all the traditional material as well. Then we have Psalm 100, more verses on God's kingship, Psalms 145 through 160. Sorry, 150. 150. Somebody just had a record scratch in their head. So 145 through 150. Those are the final 5 Psalms of the book of Psalms. There are 150 Psalms total. And these final 5 Psalms are all Psalms of praise. 145 gets called Ashrei because that's the first word of the acrostic section of it. And so you've probably heard some versions of Ashrei. We haven't been doing it on Tikva. We certainly could reintroduce it. I think it's familiar to some folks. And it is a long acrostic poem all about all about the wonderful things that God can do. Then we have 146 through 150. Each one of these psalms features hallelujah at either the beginning or the end. So these are all hallelujah psalms. We usually jump to the last one, right? Psalm 150, we sing often hallelujah, 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 right? That's that last psalm. So we have against the preference of the Shulchan Aruch, this old medieval halachic text, we choose to jump from Baruch She'amar down to Psalm 150. Okay? And then there are all these verses around Baruch, the different verses beginning with Baruch. And then we get another passage from First Chronicles, which is when David blesses God. A passage from Nehemiah, the history of Israel until the Sea of Reeds, and that leads us right up into the Song of the Sea, which happens at the Sea of Reeds, right? So the Song of the Sea is that song in Exodus that the Israelites sing as soon as they've crossed the sea and Pharaoh's army has drowned. We sang it 2 weeks ago, right? And it is actually where the text of Mi Chamocha comes from. One of the things, so we have the Song of the Sea, then some verses on God's kingship. Song of the Sea in Am Tikva's current practice is all represented by Ozi Vezimratya. So when we sing Ozi Vezimratya, those are words coming from the Song of the Sea. And you can actually hear one of our keywords today, Zimra, in that. Ozi Vezimratya, right? Yah, God, is Ozi, my strength, Vezimra. Ozi, my strength, Vezimrat Yah, and a song of God. So we have that Song of the Sea, then some verses on God's kingship that we don't usually include, and then Yishtabach is our closing blessing. And Shochenat is included in that. So Yishtabach is the first word of the closing long blessing. And so that's our closing bookend. Remember, we started with Baruch She'amar, we close with Yishtabach, and then we have the Chatzi Kaddish. Chatzi means half or partial, so Chatzi Kaddish is abbreviated or partial Kaddish. And that is a transitional Kaddish. It's a prayer that functions as a bridge from one service section to another. So you have Chatzi Kaddish, and that will transition you into Shacharit. Okay. Any questions about this structure or observations?
Have we reached the bookend on the other side?
Yishtabach is the bookend.
Yishtabach is the bookend. Okay.
It's a lot, but you don't have to remember all of this, right? This is just for you to see that there is a structure. And I'll give you this exact text, so you'll be able to see that. One of the things that's really important to me is that you don't have the experience that I had, which is that I came to a point in my life where I said, oh my God, all the stuff they never told me they deleted. How could they never have told me they deleted it? I understand not doing it. It doesn't mean that I'm here to some people say, wow, all the stuff I didn't know existed, I should take that all upon myself and do it, which is also a perfectly valid choice, right? That wasn't the choice I was looking to make, but I wanted to know, right? I wanted to know, I wanted to make sure that I could live that principle, that nothing Jewish would be foreign to me. And so I'm giving you the full scope so that you have that background, and then we're going to continue onwards. But that's a really important thing for us to recognize, is that this is the full scope of Psukei de Zimra. Any other questions or reflections? Okay, so
Just a second. I'm trying to get the finger up.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jeff.
There's one more thing I would add to the outline,
Okay.
and that's Psalm 136, which is sometimes called the Great Hallel. Hodu Ladonai ki tov ki le'olam chasdo.
Yeah. So yes, and also one that let me pull this up. So 136.
I think I've got the number. I may have the number
page
wrong.
Number?
No.
Okay. If you have, for folks who have here. Okay, so if you have a Sim Shalom at home, it's on page 92. So yes, that is so, and we often do that in yeah. Wonderful. Okay, thank you for adding that, Jeff. Yeah. Okay. So I will make sure that we have that listed when I send this out later. Any other questions? Patty, go ahead.
Yeah. So taking this course so far is, I'll just say, I say I'd love to come to services. I'm one of the people who feels that the whole entire service is too long. And learning about, and I never come to the beginning of the service. So all of this is very new stuff for me. And I'm kind of feeling like, well, what's all this material, and what am I missing out on? And I feel like I want to have that in my experience of coming to services, but and I'll probably try to get up a little earlier in the morning and get the beginning so I can start at least knowing what this is. what these prayers are. But I wanted to ask like a practical thing. The way it's being done now. Approximately how long is the section of morning blessings and then Sukkot Zimra?
Say, I think it's about 20 minutes.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah. With Birchot
About
Shachar, probably 25 to
sections.
30. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good question. So this is actually an older section of the service than Birchot Shachar, as far as when this became part of our service. The service is, in some ways, like sedimentary rock or a rubber band ball. Its sections are built upon each other. So each layer was built upon the what's sometimes called the statutory prayers, right? The fundamental prayers of the Shema and Amidah. And so Psuke de Zimra was a preparation for Shema and Amidah. And Birchot Shachar wasn't a thing yet, right?
Mm.
And then Birchot Shachar got added and also institutionalized into the synagogue, as we talked about last week, added as a preparation for Psuke de Zimra, which was also a preparation then for Shema and Amidah. Does that make sense? Okay. So, I mean, even as late as Maimonides, who lived in the Middle Ages, he said that Psalms 145 to 50, to recite those in the morning was praiseworthy, but he had a different category or a different description if something was mandatory. So he said, it's great if you do it, but it wasn't something that everyone was expected to do. So that was a later Middle Ages addition to the service. But it's only the construction that was new, because the words, as you just saw, are mostly biblical. Psalms are biblical, right? And the Shema and Ve'ahavta, that's biblical too. But all of our Birchot Shachar blessings and all of our Amidah blessings are written by rabbis. Doesn't mean they're new. Sometimes we're talking like 4th century CE, but they are newer than the biblical stuff, which is, a couple thousand years old. So, that they took these very old texts and said, we're going to treat this Torah text, this Tanakh text, as prayer. And they brought it into the service and they sang it. Kathy.
So, at what point was this section put together and by whom?
I don't have an exact date for you, but Maimonides was 11th to 12th century, so a bit after that.
This particular section comes after Maimonides.
Yes, he knew that the Psalms preceded him, but this was not a set section of the service. And also, right, the composite nature of all these different different verses from different parts of Tanakh had not been put together into a prayer book. Also, remember, prayer books function very differently before the printing press. Right? It was possible to have them, but they're very, very rare. And so the printing press locked in the service in a way that prayer books before had not, right? It was just the leader was leading and you davened with them, and there was probably community, standard practice. But the printing press solidified our services in a way that nothing before had. Deborah and then Ellen.
So, Rabbi, if part of this, the Pasuk de Zimra was preparatory to the Shema and the Amidah, and then the Birchot HaShachar, I'm sorry.
Good job. Yes, excellent. Excellent.
Came about to be that preparatory work. I'm kind of wondering, who decided then that all this material could be deleted? You're mentioning there's so much that we don't do, and like, it's not so much
the precise who, but kind of like what was the thought pattern, like why this much of the service wasn't as important from a preparatory point of view as the Birkat HaShachar. I mean, am I making any sense? Like, what
Yes.
are the principles to that should be, that must be in, or maybe they don't need to be in, versus what we exclude?
Right. So we track that by looking at different prayer books as they came out. Right. So prayer books have been published now for a while, so we can say, okay, we're going to essentially track the generations of prayer book in a given movement or in a given community. And you can, as you compare one to the next, you can see what is continuously valued to include. And sometimes they'll make little notes about, this is not included, or you can include this if you want to, which shows that the community is not including it by default. And sometimes they'll do things like intentionally mistranslate the language because there's material in that section that they don't think will appeal or resonate. And so like there have been many prayer books over time that intentionally mistranslate to be more creative. I mean, or this is just not as malicious, but it's an intentional mistranslation out of an interpretive lens, like we had with remember the Mishkan Tefillah didn't say anything about roosters, right? They intentionally mistranslated the roosters and kind of deleted them because they decided not to include it. So we can see the values of a community or a movement reflected by what they publish in the prayer book. And those prayer books are usually made by a team of rabbis who are working together to make decisions. On our modern prayer books, and even sometimes going back into the early 20th century, you get names, and it'll tell you like this is edited by Rabbi Jan Feld or Rabbi Daniel Friedlander, different rabbis over time. And then that's nice because we can look at their other writings and see what they have to say. But yeah, it's all incremental, right? And different values for different communities guide different decisions, which I know is a bit of a broad answer, but there's a lot of depth in this field that you just touched on. And so we could say, it would be a whole class unto itself. I actually took a whole course in rabbinical school tracking just the development of Reform prayer books from Germany in the mid-1800s till today. So there's a lot of material there.
And it's not just the Reform movement, though, that's making these decisions. Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So my point is that was a whole rabbinical school course just on the Reform stuff, and there are others that go along with it in other movements. Yeah.
And what you were saying in terms of what's been left in and left out, is that from the Reform perspective that you were saying, or?
It is so in practice, the conservative movement has a high level of variation on what is included. I've been in conservative shuls that do it much like we do with the specific, like doing this and this and this, and then we're done, right? And I've been in conservative shuls that will have a lot of silent davening so that people can get through the text without taking too much time, right? And then Reform synagogues tend to take a more like, what is the essence of this prayer approach? And so you'll see specific choices being made of, they say, okay, like the essence of Psukei de Zimra is joy, right? We've gone from joy and praise. And so we're going to have songs of joy and songs of praise. For example, in Sidur Sha'ar Zahav, and we're going to get to this later, but I'll bring it up now. 194. In Sha'ar Zahav, when they get to this section, they have a few of the Psalms, but they also include Ki Shemara Shabbat, which we usually have in the beginning, but they've chosen to include it in Psukei de Zimra. They also have Is this, I'm not sure if this is not a haiku. I thought it was a haiku for a second, but just a three-line poem. How happy are we? How good is our portion, and how fine our inheritance? You know, so that's a different approach, right? Is to say, okay, we're going to take like the essence of this and try to find ways that bring joy or gratitude into this section of the service. Ellen.
I don't know if I have this impression right, but I have the impression that initially there were a core of prayers, and then other prayers were added, and then other prayers were added. Do we know why they began to add other prayers?
Yes. The all those other prayers added over time were additional spiritual preparation for the quote mandatory prayers. And if you read between the lines, what you see is that the prior spiritual preparation prayers had become rote and therefore not actually spiritual anymore, and had started to feel mandatory and therefore not really preparatory. Right. And so they didn't feel that Judaism in a lot of ways is inherently conservative. And so they didn't feel that they could jettison what they'd inherited as tradition, but they needed something to feel authentic and organic. And so they brought in new prayers. And it wasn't until nowadays we see a more comfort around jettisoning, and that's significantly shaped by philosophy, right? And by saying like, oh, we're going to be guided by principles, and that is also valid as a spiritual practice, not just around texts that we've inherited. So that was a major shift in the modern era. Because now you do see that winnowing down. But before, it's because what they inherited, like any generation, when you inherit what someone else tells you to say, may or may not come to feel holy.
So may I ask a follow-up question?
Mm-hmm.
I grew up as a Reform Jew. I was amazed to learn when I went to a conservative Orthodox service that people wandered in at all different times during the service. And I'm wondering now if this is kind of the reason that there's a core place prayer really starts, and you need to be there by then.
Absolutely. I mean, it's important that you need to pray an Amidah at some point, right? So ideally you're there by Shema, and then you can have your Shema and your Amidah, your really central requisite prayers. And that would ensure also that you're present by the Torah service. But if you miss the Amidah, you always have Musaf Amidah after Torah service in a conservative service, right? So that's still available to you. Yeah, people know it's long. The rabbis know it's long. Eitz Chaim, the synagogue in Palo Alto, opens its prayer book that they created with a meditation on boredom. Because it's real. Like, so yes, that is where that comes from, and it's also a cultural inheritance thing of, Reform Judaism grew out of German intellectual society that valued being on time and presenting well and sitting politely, and so those were kind of cultural values that got passed down into Reform services. And also Reform services are shorter, so it's easier to arrive and stay the whole time and then leave. Yeah, good question. Okay, Kathy, you had a question. Also, we need to go to a break soon.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, the whole idea of people at our service don't come till the Torah service because they know that they've got Musaf. But if you didn't have Musaf, you wouldn't get to pray the Amidah.
Yeah. And I often try to put guests at bar and bat mitzvahs at ease by reassuring them it is okay to step out and come in, right? Because there's just not, because we know we've got long services. The culture is different here, but you have to prime people towards that, because otherwise they're trying to be polite. They're trying to do the right thing, but you don't want them to suffer for it. Okay, so on that note, we're going to pause for a break. I'm going to give it Elena, I love your question in the chat. And that's there's a lot of deviation and a lot of additions, right? I think that to really narrow it down, you have to actually say which prayers come from Talmud, and the majority do not. But sometimes also, I mean, that a lot of that is in a deep dive on Tractate Brachot, which makes sense, Brachot blessings, and so if you go through that, you can see different prayers pop up in familiar ways. And sometimes you see different versions of prayers, and you can tell which one of them got selected for the Siddur. Like the silent prayer, the silent meditation at the end of the Amidah about God guard my lips from evil. That is one rabbi's silent meditation in the Talmud, and you can see the other rabbis and what they chose to pray next to that. So it's a good tractate to study. Okay, it seems like pretty much everyone is back now. So I have put something into the chat. That is a copy of our Shabbat morning slides. And so I know that some folks have prayer books at home. And if you do and you want to grab one, that's great. In a moment when we go into breakout rooms. And if you don't, that's also fine. You will have access here to the Shabbat morning slides. We can use this repeatedly as our template, our foundations for our study of prayer. And so the task at hand is that you are going to go into groups of 3 to 4, and I'd like you to brainstorm at least 2 different versions of Psukei de Zimra. You can say, I really like what we have, and here's what I see we have. You can say, I want to create something very contemporary. I would love a poem here that speaks to this. I'd love a song here that speaks to that. Or I know this pop song that actually is really spiritual, and I'd like to bring that in. Right? You can say, hey, let's do a family-friendly Psukei de Zimra. What would be some of the songs of joy that come into that? And so as a group, you have at least 2 options, right? You come up with at least 2 options. I'll pop around to answer questions and consult. If you need to message me and I'm popping around, if you can text me. There's my phone number. And because you won't be able to message me through Zoom. So texting will be an easier way to get a hold of me, to be like, Rabbi Cheva, come to room 3. And you will lose this chat when you go into the breakout rooms. So if you want the information here on this chat, either click the link or write down the number or both, so that you have access to that, or take a photo. That's great, Sherry. So, okay, so remember, the prompt is brainstorm.
It'll also be available in the recording.
Yes, it will be available in the recordings. Yeah. Yeah. So the prompt is brainstorm at least 2 different approximately 15-minute versions of Psukei de Zimra. The length of time is not so critical, but it is a good benchmark. And so you have access to our Shabbat morning slides, and you want to specifically look at slides 25 through 38. And for the purposes of our class today, I'm going to insert an extra slide that has the full outline of Psukei de Zimra that I was showing you earlier. So slide 25 will be our outline of Psukei de Zimra. And I will have that ready for you in there. Make sure the text isn't teeny, teeny, tiny. Great. Okay. So now you can see the full outline on slide 25, and you're essentially going to look at slides 25 to 39. Okay, slides 25 to 39 is what we have in our Shabbat morning service for for Psuke de Zimra. Are there any questions about this activity? Deborah, I saw you, but can you say that again out loud? I couldn't.
You want us two different versions within our each group.
Yes. Yeah. And if you finish and you've got extra time, go for a third. But like, yeah, I think that 2 is reasonable. We're going to have from now until 7:50. So we really have about 15 minutes because if we go over a little bit, that's fine. But I want us to be able to hear what the other groups did when we come back.
I have to ask a question. I need an example.
Great.
I'm
Good
not
question.
familiar with this material. I have no idea
Great.
how to start this.
Patty, I'm so glad you said that. That's great. The goal is not that people enter this activity feeling bamboozled.
I'm not qualified.
So you are qualified because the goal here is to create a passage of service that brings in themes of joy and spiritual elevation. Right? Remember what we said at the beginning about we want a process here that's going to pare down the husks of negativity. So that's our central organizing principle for Psuke de Zimra. And so it's up to you and your group to decide what's the process for paring down the husks. The rabbis gave us a template. You can use that template. I know you don't know what's in the Psalms. So essentially you can say, hey, I think that we'd like some of the Psalms. And that's all you need for the purposes of this activity. I'd really like to include some of the Psalms is good enough. You don't need to pick, 136 versus 142, right?
So are we supposed to look through the slides and say, for example, I really like this one. I think this is joyful. I would choose this one, and somebody else choose something else. I mean,
that is there as to be a resource for you if you would like to start with the slides that we usually do. If you'd like to start from a totally open-ended, there's no wrong answers here. So you could say one of our 15-minute Psuke de Zimra proposals is that we imagine that we're having services near the beach, and Psuke de Zimra is going to be a 10-minute walk along the beach with X meditative prompt, and then coming back to sing these 2 songs, right? Like that would be a real like break it out of the box sort of Psuke de Zimra.
Okay.
Or you can say, I really like singing Psalm 150 and I want it to be super musical. Everyone's getting tambourines and we're going to make Psalm 150 last an extra 5 minutes. And we're really going to lean into Psalm 150 because that just is really going to bring the joy and help break us out of our shells. Are those helpful examples?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks again for saying that out loud. I think I'll do groups of 4, and so we'll open those now, and I'll pop through and also continue answering questions as we go. Okay, I'll see you soon. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you had some fruitful conversations. Certainly when I was popping through, it sounded like it. So we just have 7 minutes now to share. Either you can share what your group came up with, or you can share something that you learned or realized in the process. So, open discussion. Who would like to get us started? Deborah?
I can start.
Great. Kristen and then Deborah. Sounds good.
I don't know. Kristen was in our group, but I think Kristen speaks faster and more succinct than me, and she can articulate.
Go for it, Kristen.
Well, one of the themes that we talked about, so we all kind of agreed that incorporating things like movement, meditation, and music can help sort of elevate things. And so I was thinking for one of the themes, having a little bit more of an active Psuke de Zimra, so especially for kids and also for adults too, because some of us need to get the wiggles out before we get into the Shema and the Amidah and the Torah service. So we liked the idea of starting with Psalm 150, having Ozi, Vizimrat Yah, and then Ashrei, because Ashrei, Sharon said, is another good one for movement and musical instruments and kind of connecting with your with your community, and it's much more of a communal kind of thing. And so have that kind of being a theme that's more sort of movement and music based, a little bit more active, right? Because we've kind of been sitting for the first part, and so let's get the wiggles out and then get into the next part. And then another theme that we talked about, which we kind of didn't get into like picking specific aspects of it, would be one that was more sort of meditative and inward looking. And so that would be a good one for doing outside. And just as I was flipping through my Siddur, I thought, oh, Psalm 19 would be a good one to include there because it talks about the magnificence of creation and the sunlight. And so something, one that was kind of movement and music, get the wiggles out, and another one that was sort of more thinking bigger.
And on that front, we did talk about that perhaps occasionally we could maybe do a field trip sort of venue. Like when Rabbi Ora was here, there was a beautiful clearing in the park that we had gathered around, and it's not that far, it's close. Anyway, that was just an idea, but that was part of discussion.
Thank you. Great. Kathy?
Well, we may not have been quite as creative as that. We talked about musical instruments and that there should be, a lot of singing because this is songs of praise. We talked about checking out different psalms and incorporating different psalms. We talked about looking at not just praise, but starting out with appreciation as a way of getting more into this part of the service. If you're not quite ready for the praise, you could talk about, what you have appreciated. Maybe there's some reading, or maybe it's just what, would you like to say that you're thinking about, that you're grateful for right now, or that you appreciate. So those were some of the things that we came up with.
Great. I'm really glad we're recording because then I don't have to take notes. I can go back and check all of this later. Other thoughts, other things that you've learned, other services you came up with?
Rabbi Ellen had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. So then let's do.
I don't have my hand up, but I think it would be great if Tracy would talk about what we talked about if she's comfortable doing it.
Okay. Great. So I think Jeff had his hand up, and then I'll go to Tracy. Corinna, I couldn't tell if you had your hand up or not, if you're going. So, okay, we're going to go Jeff, Tracy, Corinna.
Okay. One idea we had was a meditation-based Psuke de Zimra with starting out with some kind of an introductory reading, and then meditation, probably with background music and guide. We had discussion about how long it should be. I think we have to learn that experimentally a bit. And then moving toward some sort of a conclusion of another English reading. Did I get that right, Hannah?
Yeah, we also added people specific music, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. There are probably others. And there was a fifth.
The Ashrei.
Oh, Ashrei and Ashrei. And we used, the way we used to do it at B'nai Emunah, Susan was one of the people, and there were two others, and it was responsive, and it was really fun, and that it should be joyous. It was joyous.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Yes, we had an order. So Tracy, go ahead.
Uh, I don't think we came up with a final
That's
structure,
okay.
but
You can just share some of the
we
things that came up along the way.
came up with some things to happen at some point, and there was a mixture of wanting um, well, suggestion of silence, having everybody be very silent at first, and really experiencing that, and then maybe moving into some humming, all of us humming, maybe a tune or something, and then eventually there could be cello or something like that, or musical instrument, or a song that would then lead us to some kind of physical dance that might get people to move. Some people who want to move would move. Some people who want to move potentially in the middle could go faster, but the physicality would be to get the blood going and to feel that sense of joy and exuberance. And then um, so everybody get, they get their heart rate moving a little bit. And then I don't quite know what we would do in between and which service, but then I suggested an idea of whispering the Shema all together rather than chanting it, and then but putting our arms around each other on our shoulders as we're saying that. And as we're saying it, we come closer and closer together so that by the time we say Achad, we are all in sort of a unified, central, close unit of one.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Hi, Rachel. Corinna, go ahead, and then Sharon.
I would just add that we also talked about the importance of having some psalms in there or in some version of this service. And one of the things that I just want to note that we grappled with is that although some of us really love the idea of like a really active physical dancing thing, we would still need, even if we wanted to go that way, we would need to be mindful of the people who might not be able to move in that way, and how do we include them in that joy. But we didn't really come to like maybe we could do something where we're like laying on, touching each other in some kind of either in a circle or just in like the group of whoever is around. But that was as much as the idea of really having that very exuberant song and dance appeals to me, it also just something that we would need to be mindful of some way to incorporate that.
Absolutely. Okay. Sharon, and then we'll wrap up.
We talked about taking a moment to pause and take a deep breath, and like before the Shema, instead of just moving right along into the next prayer, really being super mindful and calling out that pause and taking the deep breath collectively. And I didn't say this in the group, but you're supposed to really accentuate that, the echad, and calling that out and having everybody say that together really brings much more to the Shema. And it came up also the dancing at Lador Vador. And I know that's not in this section, but the whole idea about being intergenerational and having the kids dancing and make it a joyful moment for everybody.
Mhm. Thank you. Okay, Deborah, we do need to wrap up. If you have a very brief comment, you can go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to respond to Coco's comment about including everybody. And I'm thinking that even if we have joyous dancing, there's opportunity for people to be, with instruments or percussive in some way, so that I think that we could accommodate that in a really beautiful, significant way that people would not feel left out.
Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, well, I'm feeling a little more joyous with all of these suggestions, and I so appreciate it. And also I hope it's clear to you that all the different perspectives and these motes of genius that we're bringing in to our creative services as we think about this and how that affects our spirituality, right? And how that affects how we think about services, knowing the structure and also thinking about the essence of it and holding both of those. So I look forward next week to moving on. Remember, no class on February 25th, so you can take that off your calendar. And I'll stay on for a second for any questions, but thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Have a good
Good
night.
night for
Good night.
reporting for the group.
But Rabbi, it was so interesting how the different groups, in a way, came up with some very common essences that we all
Yes.
kind of agreed with. I thought,
Yeah.
it sounded that way to me anyway.
Yeah. Music and dance, or music in particular, is really big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I put it in the chat, but we also brought up the idea of bringing not only the school kids into Friday night, but into Saturday. And if
Yeah.
they could lead a service, then it would bring more people in, and we could make a family-friendly Saturday service too, and then they could join in Lador, Vador, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Sherry?
Do you know what the word zikr means in Kathy's comment?
I
At
don't.
Chant and
but I
Drum?
think
Okay.
I think it's a musical instrument, but I was going to look it up.
Okay. It didn't certain, sure, safe, or secure is what it says in my definition. So that's not a noun. So I don't know.
It also could be an autocorrect.
I think it's a zither, the instrument.
That
the
makes sense.
zither.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
They used
That
to do
makes
that at Drummond.
That makes sense because that is an instrument. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Good night,
Yeah,
everyone.
I just wanted to say that not only were there common themes of the dancing and the song and that kind of exuberance, but more than one group I noticed also wanted, maybe even ours started at the beginning, like at that moment of silence or some kind of reflection, and then breath work to build up into that joy, which I thought was interesting that multiple people brought that up. But I actually had a question, as long as when we're talking about the saying the Shema. I have had this question in my mind when we're saying Adonai Echad. Is it what am I trying to say? I don't have quite the right word. Is it bad form to sing that in harmony when we're talking about the oneness?
That's such an interesting thought. No, it's not bad form. I appreciate the intentionality behind the question, though. Also, next week is all about the Shema and its blessings. So you can bring this up again with the whole class.
Right.
Because I would love, there's no wrong answer on that one. I think that you could probably make an argument either way. I feel for a very long time, I never sang harmony on Shema. And when I'm in the congregation, I sing harmony on basically everything. And so it did have that feeling for me. And then I released myself of that feeling, and now I do sometimes sing harmony on Shema. And it is interesting, right? It changes my feeling of it. So I go back and forth.
Okay, that's interesting, and thank you. Good night. Yeah.
All right, good night.
Rabbi, when we're on this next week, perhaps you could give your thought process of what you went through to get to the point where it's okay to be harmonic on Shema with the whole group.
I'm happy to. It wasn't super deep. It was like a reassessment of, is this practice still what I want? And I decided I'm going to try something else to keep things intentional and spiritual. Like, I was going to say fresh, but that's like kind of what I'm getting at there, right?
I see. Okay, that makes sense too. Yeah. Okay. I just it's good. I just love that the question came up because I would never have thought of that, and it just makes such a depth of like intentionality, basically.
Right, because it names that cantors will tell you over and over, the music is the prayer, right? And what we're doing in this class is expanding beyond the music is the prayer. But usually we start at that point of the music is the prayer, and we can build out the context and the structure and the content of the prayer itself. right? But rabbis will try to pull people towards meaning and substance and stuff, and the cantors are like, "You're missing the point. You're missing the point. The music is it." And we use the text of the prayer to elevate and bring us towards different musics, and we will. Sorry for the bad English on that, but like we will have, we can choose our prayer based on how we choose our music,
And
and so it's a different one.
well, and it's so interesting to get me because one of the most joyous services I was at was during one of the biennials where they had incorporated more modern day music as the melody for, the prayers that we were singing. And for me, it made it so accessible. And yet now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering, um, you know, the layers of that, because what was what was the original song that was chosen, and is it okay to put these holy words or religious words to this music which had nothing to do, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the layers of that, and I don't know, I hope that we can explore that even a little bit, because I do feel like it was quite joyous to have very familiar tunes and applying, sacred text to them.
Yeah. And Patty, I saw you were going to say something, but before, if I might just respond to that very quickly, the most common application of that is in Adon Olam, because Adon Olam, every line, Adon Olam Asher Malach, it is 4 words, each is 2 syllables. And because it has that very strict structure, it goes to almost anything that's in 4/4, which is most of our Western music. So you can sing Adon Olam to all sorts of stuff. It's very easy, which is why you hear Cantor Ozzy Schwartz in New York singing Adon Olam to Hamilton and to K-pop Demon Hunters and to like all sorts of stuff, because it's easy and you can do it, and people love hearing that in their service. Maybe it makes them chuckle, it makes them happy, it makes them feel like a blend of their worlds in that space.
Yes.
But so that's one version of what you're saying. Okay, sorry, Patty. I just wanted to jump in and say that, but go ahead.
Last week, I think we talked about getting English translations for the
Mm-hmm.
prayers. Are you able to direct us to where we can get that?
Um, so right
I mean,
now
I
your
can come to
best,
service and read the prayer book, but when I'm home and I'm thinking about our classes, I'd love to be able to have some translations to look at.
yeah, so the translations for our services are all in that slide deck that I sent, that I linked for
Oh,
this.
okay.
Yeah, and
Oh,
I'm gonna
perfect.
link that in the notes that I'm sending out in a few minutes
Okay,
as well. So you should be able
wonderful.
to look through that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I have an extra copy of the Reform Prayer Book if you'd like to have it. I'm glad to
I
give it to
actually,
you.
I actually have the Reform prayer book too. But not
I
the
was thinking with that
I
idea
gotta
that
go. Bye-bye.
the
Oh, take care.
harmony on the Shema is such a beautiful concept, because we know that we are all created in God's image, and yet each of us is different. So there's an innate harmony right there.
Oh,
That's
that's such a
beautiful.
lovely thought.
Beautiful.
That's lovely.
Well, if there's
Yeah.
no further thoughts, I think I'll need to go make some dinner. So
Yeah,
we should go
Right.
do that. I had a
We,
little
we,
snack before it tied me over.
yeah, we
But
kind of waylaid it into a whole nother concept of the prayer books and the time, but
it's great. It's really, really great. I love it. I'm
Thank
really
you
enjoying
so
this.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
everyone.
you.
you. Thank
Have a
you
good
so
evening.
much. Be well.
Good
You
night.
too. Bye.
Good night.